All right, today we're talking about how to be a unicorn for your business, for your brand, and also how to leverage other unicorns to build your brand, build your business. My guest today is Jen Kem. I'll tell you more about her in a second, so stay tuned.
Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we feature top entrepreneurs, business leaders, and thought leaders and ask them how they built key relationships to get where they are today. Now, let's get started with the show.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I'm the host of this show, and every week we talk with smart CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs from all kinds of companies. You check out our archives. We've got Netflix, Grubhub, Redfin, Gusto, Kinko's, YPO, EO, Activation Blizzard. Lots of great episodes for you to check out. And of course, this episode brought to you by Rise 25, our company where we help B2B businesses to get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with done-for-you podcasts and content marketing. And Jen, I know that you appreciate the importance of relationships. That's what it's about for me. It's always been the most important thing for me is meeting someone interesting like you, highlighting their story, telling others about them. I've always loved doing that, and I love the ability to do that. So if you want to learn more about what we do, go to rise25.com or email us at support@rise25.com. All right, Jen, so excited to have you here today. You are a brand strategist and chief executive officer of Master Brand Institute. You've helped thought leaders to reach millions by helping them to build their personal brand, and you've represented influencers and celebrities, CEOs, experts, all kinds of different people in their journeys. And we're going to talk about your journey. And you also have a great new book out, which is called Unicorn. It's all about unicorns. I previewed it in the beginning there, and we're going to talk about that. But first, I'd love to know a little bit more about what my guests are like when they were growing up. And I was reading about your background, and you had a habit for falling off of buildings when you were a kid. That seemed to be like a pastime. Joking about it now, but that and also combined with a car accident were two foundational, pivotal experiences that you had that really affected you. So tell me a little bit about what that was like in your childhood.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think if you ask my mother today, well, she says it a lot, it explains a lot, me falling out of a three-story building when I was two and falling on my head uh, and this is back in the 70s, friends. I tell people I'm a seasoned chicken, not a spring chicken. And so back then we didn't have cell phones. If your parents left you home with the sitter, it was very hard to get in touch with them. So at a very young age, even surviving a car crash where there were no other survivors in the car crash, it's interesting, right? How those things you don't even realize because you're young. I was young. I mean, both of those accidents happened when I was 3 and 5, respectively. And then you add to that I grew up in a very tiny rural plantation town in Hawaii on the north shore of Oahu. And my grandparents immigrated from the Philippines and worked in the sugar and pineapple industries as, laborers, basically. And so I grew up in a house and in a town where there weren't more than 2,000 people. And so it was. But my mom will tell you, and I'll tell you now that I came out of the chute super curious about the world. Like everything that was around me, I questioned. And even in my own cultural upbringing, that was different because, in my own culture, you kind of compliance and obedience are given rewards, not questioning and rebellion. And so for me, where I found my solace because I felt so different, truly a black sheep in my family and in my community, even though I did feel very cared for because of the community aspect of it, I still felt super different. I kind of found my biggest respite, besides surviving those two weird physical things, in the little rural library that had about, I don't know, 300, 400 kids' books and then the rest adult books. And I, even from a young age, found books to be a way to understand the world, including encyclopedias and the almanac. If you put a book in front of me, John, I was that kid that just loved it. And I've always had this love of reading.
We have to say to the young ones listening, an encyclopedia was kind of like the internet, but in book form. And
exactly.
It was so cool if you had a good set of them, which were kind of hard to find sometimes, but if you had a good set of them, you could read about almost any topic, or at least whatever fit from here to here.
Oh my gosh, John, like, I was talking about this with a group of friends who are all about a certain age. And I remember like the best gift you could get from your parents was like the encyclopedia set, right? Which now we take for granted because Google is like the master
Everything.
encyclopedia indexing all the things. But yeah, and so that might give you a little insight for those of you listening, the kind of, let's say, kid I was and the kind of environment that I was in, and understanding that a lot of times some of the biggest thinking and ideas and innovation and vision comes even in places, especially in places where that's not readily available, but there are a few people that, kids especially, young people who are curious and wondering and natural problem solvers. And I feel like we're everywhere and we always have been everywhere. And that's kind of like how I navigated forward what I thought it was going to be. I like in second grade, for example, I went to this tiny little Catholic school. My mom and dad realized because I was such a voracious learner that the best gift they could give me is an education, like really invest in my education and so the best education I could get in that little town was this Catholic school where there were like 15 of us, right, in that classroom. And in second grade, Sister Fatima asked us, that question everybody gets asked in second grade, what do you want to be when you grow up? And, all the boys in class were saying they wanted to be doctors and police officers and firefighters. And then the girls in my class were saying they wanted to be nurses and teachers and moms. And my answer was, I want to be the general counsel of Coca-Cola International. And this was in
In
second
second
grade.
grade, you said that?
Yes.
That's funny.
And I don't want anybody to get any thoughts that I was like that brilliant in second grade. What I was my grandmother, who I mentioned was an immigrant, she had not more than a second grade education. And every morning before she would bring me to school, I used to sit next to her and she would have Lipton hot tea and peanut butter toast, and she would read the newspaper. And she would hand me the business section and say to me, I don't understand this part of the newspaper, but you might be interested because you like to read everything. And so here I am, this second grade kid reading the business section because my grandmother, who had a second grade education, gave it to me. And I don't remember the actual article, John, but what I do remember is like I must have picked it up from the business section of this
Mm.
idea of general counsel of Coca-Cola International, and when I said it out loud, I got in trouble in class. Sister Fatima was not pleased that
Because
I
you
had
think you were messing with her or what?
basically like making up stories that didn't make any sense. And I was devastated because I was such like an A student. Like I loved learning. And that was the earliest memory that I can remember, not just thinking I was a black sheep, but feeling like outside they were calling me a black sheep because it was like I got in trouble for naming what I thought would be a cool thing to do when I grew up.
Mm.
And I remember going home and my parents telling me, you know, and my parents really did try to stoke my vision and my curiosity. And, they said, look, people aren't going to understand you when you use words that they don't understand. But there's plenty of places in the world where you're going to belong, and you just have to know that that's true. And that's kind of that premise of each one of us is a unicorn. We have rare skills and natural gifts and talents, and that what we need is to be surrounded also by people who will see that and help cultivate and shape it in a way that's actually nutritive and generative instead of like thinking, okay, you're weird, go in the corner, that type of thing. And it's funny. The aftermath story from second grade is that Sister Fatima is now my friend on Facebook. She's still around and she's so
Wow.
proud of me. And,
Yeah.
we're talking about what, gosh, 42 years later, right?
Well, and I think there's a different understanding of how to react to kids that have big dreams today
Totally,
than there
totally.
was back then, especially growing up in a small plantation town where kids didn't grow up to be general counsel of Coca-Cola at that
Yeah.
at that
Yeah.
in that era.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and even the word general counsel or the title general counsel, my mom even said, and mom was pretty smart. She's an educated woman, but she was like, "What is a general counsel?" And I said, "It's a lawyer. It's the top
I'm,
lawyer in a company."
I ended up going to law school, and I can tell you, when I was 7, I had no clue what a general counsel was. I don't know if I would have been able to guess what it was.
Yeah, and so and it was interesting because my mom said, "Here's the thing, Jenny. In my family, I'm called Jenny, not just Jen." She said, "Jenny, sometimes people." just need to hear the simple word, not the more like the big word. And again, it was kind of a nod to, wow, like I have to shape myself in order for people to accept me.
Mm.
And so, that's really like, I call it being like some of my values that I have today are very much shaped from some of those experiences that I just shared.
Mm.
And, you know, on one hand, it didn't feel good sometimes, but on the other hand, I'm grateful for it because it helped me go, you know what, I know I'm not the only person like this. And as I navigated through life and even in my own like career now, whether it was in corporate or now, owning my own company, it has really shaped a lot of how I see why I want to elevate people's voices and, people's ideas,
Yeah,
because we need them.
it seems like you had a pretty supportive, nurturing environment growing up. But you had this weird experience where you thought you were going to Boston for college
Yeah.
after graduating from high school. And then your mom said, we're going to Disneyland. You're like, woo, Disneyland on our way to Boston College. And you didn't end up at Boston College.
No, it was actually Boston University, but
Boston University.
I also got into Boston College, so I did get into both. But I
Yeah.
had this vision because, in second grade when I named what I wanted to be, and I don't think that that's normal. I think most people don't know who they want to be when they grow up. I don't know what would have happened if I would have pursued that, but that's the reason I didn't become general counsel of anything. Let's put it that way, is because I read in the library that if you want to become what you want to become, you need to surround yourself by the people who have what you have what you want. And so I was very clear through elementary school and moving into high school with my parents who were supportive, but, and I will use the word but, they did still feel like I needed to not like aspire for so much, like because they didn't want me to be disappointed. And given that I'm from, let's call it the West Coast, given I'm from Hawaii and the Bay Area, I was born in San Francisco actually, and my mom is from Hawaii, and my dad is actually from Manila, but they met in San Francisco. That I told them, I said, I have to go to school in Boston because the greatest lawyers go to school in Boston and they go to Harvard Law. And that was my goal. Like in fourth grade, by the time I got into fourth grade, I said, well, they told me I can't do it, so I'm going to do it. And this is the path forward. Well, again, although I love my mom dearly. And when you guys read my book, I always like to read the acknowledgments of a book, whether it's a fiction or a nonfiction book first. And my acknowledgement section is 10 pages long. I wrote basically a love letter to every person that I felt really like brought me on the journey. And in that, I say, my mom was strong and resilient and very focused. But at the same time, she really wanted to protect me from the dangers of the world. And so because of that, I was so clear I do not want to go to school on the West Coast. I'm like, if I go to school in LA or San Francisco, I'm going to end up being distracted from my goal. And she didn't want me to go to Boston, not just because it was far, but it was cold. And frankly, I got a full ride scholarship to Loyola Marymount, like literally full ride, full 4-year scholarship. And at the time, my parents were getting divorced, and my mom was worried about the finances and worried about the debt that she would incur. But she did not feel like she could talk to me about that. And I think all of us I'm a parent now. I have 3 children, and now I really understand and empathize that my mom was just trying to navigate a bunch of different decisions. And when you're a parent, sometimes even if your kid is 17, and frankly, and with all humility, I'm a very like communicative I loved understanding the why behind things. She still felt like she couldn't really tell me why that was important. It was mainly because she was just worried she couldn't pay for it, but she was too ashamed and worried about that. So instead, what she did is she duped me. She told me we were going to Boston, that she was going to drop me off, and instead we stopped over in LA, and she brought me to Loyola Marymount, and it changed the entire trajectory of my life and career for that decision. And I didn't even talk to my mom for 2 years because of it. But again, looking back, I now understand it. And although I don't know what it would have been like if I would have stepped into Boston, I can't say that I don't really appreciate how my life has unfolded as a result of
Mm.
that disruption.
Mm.
So, you know,
Yeah, kind of like those car accidents and
correct.
everything kind of has a purpose.
Yeah.
You end up going into a corporate career for a number of years. Talk a little bit about that and what drew you to entrepreneurship. I know that there was a colleague of yours that it turns out was getting paid a lot more than you were, which just kind of course, like anyone, rubbed you the wrong way.
Right, right, right. Well, after this, I truly had this uh, I had this calcified identity of myself that I felt had been betrayed when I didn't get to become the general counsel of Coca-Cola International. And so when I ended up going to school in California, which I felt like had a very different brand identity for professionalism than Boston. I don't know why, but because I was young, I really felt like, okay, my dreams are dashed. Who am I now? Like I really had an identity crisis at 18 because I thought this is what I was going to do. And then I was like, what am I going to do over here? And I remember my mom going, you can still be the general counsel of Coca-Cola International. You're just going to go to school over here and then you're going to go in. But I could not connect the dots
Mm.
between that. I just thought, oh, there's just no way. So, of course, this was in the early 90s. And the first big internet boom was happening in California, right? This was the era of Netscape and eBay and Yahoo. And so like really exciting things were happening. And at the same time, you need to get a job, you need to make money. And so when I was in college, I knew, well, I guess if I'm not going to do um, what I thought I was going to do, I'm going to go work in tech. And that's really it. It was because of my proximity to those industries. It had nothing to do with my vision or my dreams, if you will. I was like, well, it makes sense. Everybody's going to, goes to school here. One of the first things, this was even when before Accenture was Accenture. It was like when it was still Arthur Anderson and they
Yeah,
had
yeah.
just changed their name to Accenture. And I like took a job like that. And then I accidentally started working in advertising because I wanted to try a lot of different industries. And um, I got a job as an intern at Ogilvy and Mather, which is, one of the biggest advertising agencies in the world and founded by the godfather of marketing, who is David Ogilvy. And it was at that first job that I realized how big and how fascinating um, human behavior in relationship to commerce and making decisions about what they were loyal to was. I started to realize like how fun and how that kind of stoked and scratched the inner curious person I was as a young person. And so after doing that for 2 years, and funny parallel story is that the account that I worked on was the Coca-Cola International account. So I did get some of my itch scratched, if you will. And what's crazy is, man, like, John, this is like 1996, and we're talking about Coca-Cola had a $1 billion marketing budget just for their advertising on TV
I
in
believe it. Yeah.
96.
Yeah.
And we had that account. And so I learned a ton about how the sausage is made and the mindset and influence and persuasion techniques
Mhm.
that are used in marketing. And I started to realize like I really want to learn now. I've learned how to now like advertise a brand. I was really interested in how to bring a brand to market, which is a little bit different. And so I really wanted to become this really excellent generalist around strategy and marketing and brands. And I started to realize, okay, this is fun, actually. Okay, it's okay. Then I'm not a lawyer. Maybe that worked out for the best. And I started to pursue jobs in that. And very quickly in Silicon Valley, I became this, what I call like this go-to market specialist, this unicorn that I would get brought in and recruited even inside of the company to drive complex transformation inside of the organization. Because when you're bringing a new product to market and it's changing your entire identity, it requires you to rally different stakeholders into the mission at hand. And I didn't realize that I was good at that until I started getting a couple projects under my belt. And so by the time I left corporate in 2006 to start my own business, I had brought a lot of ideas to market that we take for granted today. One of them is HIPAA EDI and HIPAA privacy. I led the efforts to get that transformed across the country through Blue Cross Blue Shield. And then my last job, I was my last employable place, because now I think I'm unemployable. Was working at Verizon when it was shifting its identity from telecom to technology. Verizon and AT&T were in the race to bring this new technology they called Internet Protocol TV, because uh, they had um, they had innovated Internet Protocol voice, right? Being able to like use, a phone for some of you young people, if you really know what a phone is, beyond cell service, like you could use the cloud to call people from business to business. And now they wanted to do it with TV, and they wanted to take on the cable companies, because the cable companies were heavily regulated by the FCC, but telecommunications and technology were not. And so it was a big advantage. Parallel to that, Netflix was destroying the blockbuster model, and we saw an opportunity to like join forces. But first, the technology had to exist. It really had to be taken to market. And so that was my last big thing. And I brought that technology to market. Um, and then that's where, when you mentioned earlier, the story of I was in charge of B2B. That's what people don't realize. In a company, B2B always makes more money than B2C. B2C is sexy. When I say, business to consumer is sexy. Self-service is in
It,
B2C,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
But B2B is where the profit and the
for
money
sure.
is.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is true because I know many of your clients and your listeners are B2B service providers. They're businesses that, offer products and services to companies. And I know how lucrative that is. And yet I would be brought into these consumer stuff, again, Coca-Cola, similar, right? It's like, all the things I said when I was in second grade, because I was the one who could turn them into a big profit, big impact kind of situation. And what I observed was that it wasn't the idea or the product, it was the people that actually made a product be accepted by the marketplace. And I found that fascinating. Of course, the product has to work, it has to be good, right?
Yeah.
But to make it sustainable, scalable, and legendary, it was like the humans that really brought it to life. And so in 2006, when I'd finally brought IPTV to market, I was told that I thought I was going to be in line to be CMO, and then possibly I had big dreams. I was like, I'm going to be CEO of Google one day. Like that was kind of my vision since I was already in Silicon Valley. And I was looking at what Marissa Mayer did at Yahoo, both good and bad. And I was like, I could be that for Google. And what
Mhm.
happened was, while I was working my butt off for 3 years getting this initiative to market successfully, and I had two young kids at the time, my two daughters, um, my counterpart in B2C was playing golf with our boss, like
Mhm.
every other day. And I was realized when I got passed up for the promotion and ended up reporting to him, um, who, by the way, I've got nothing against. We're friends still, and he's very jealous that I have my own autonomy and he still works in corporate. Again,
Mhm.
nothing wrong with working in corporate or having your own business, but we are friends. Because I told him, I said, I don't think it's your fault. I don't think that you were trying to work against me. I think if we don't understand that it's not just about the work ethic and the work product that you put in, it's about the relationships, right? And that actually you need both in order to make your vision come true. Um, I realized in that moment it was my time to then bet on myself, that I was the biggest next idea that I wanted to bring to market. Like
Yeah.
I was bringing all these other ideas to market. And so yeah, I ventured off on my own in 2006, and I've been doing this for that
And
long now.
and wasn't one of the first things you did, speaking of the difference between B2B and B2C, didn't you start a retail company selling underwear
I did.
in Hawaii? Now, how do you go from, okay, working on the Coca-Cola account to I'm going to start a retail operation? And then I also read that you took it to eight figures in 6 months.
Yeah, I give, the thing is, my gift really, like, what is my superpower? I can smell the money. And what that means is I am really good at identifying a winner, whether it's a personal brand, a product brand, or a company brand. And so for me, it's funny because I'd never had any aspirations to be an entrepreneur. I am totally an accidental entrepreneur. And even when I left corporate, I didn't like get mad and then leave. I actually took 9 months and made a plan. And what I was really doing in those 9 months was looking for I was looking for the idea because I was like, I don't know what I want to do. I thought if and so I decided, let me go and allow myself to see what's working and what is actually needed. And at the time, I had moved back to Hawaii because I wanted to raise my children in that environment, very family-oriented environment that I mentioned that I grew up with, while still like instilling in them like to be whoever they wanted to be. And so when I was in Hawaii, I started to notice I would fly in, and I had gone to Dallas a lot because Verizon, all the telecommunications companies are in Texas. And I used to fly from Texas back to Hawaii. And when I'd get off the plane, I started to notice that all the women, especially, had a familiar new carry-on, and it was a pink and white bag with Victoria's Secret written across it. And I started to realize, whoa, that might be a winner. So, because in Hawaii at the time, there wasn't even a Macy's or a Nordstrom that women could shop at. They only had Walmart and not even a Target. And, when you become an adult, you're kind of past the 5 pack in plastic underwear. And so it's literally like women would have to get on a plane to get
Wow.
basic stuff. So
As is the case for a lot of different things for people in
totally.
Hawaii. Yeah, it's difficult to get one.
Totally. Well, in Hawaii, well, and what I started to realize is, what if? So I started to go, what if I started that here and not only started it here, but went to Alaska and went to Puerto Rico and all the US territories? Because the next step, and I hope everybody, even if you're a business owner or listening, kind of how I research a winner, is I started to go, what is Victoria's Secret doing in the next 3 years? And I went into their SEC filings and I studied what kind of moves they were making.
Because you want to
Um,
see if they're planning on moving into Hawaii, probably not a good idea for you to.
Correct.
Yeah.
And what they actually said to their shareholders at the time, Les Wexner, who is kind of a retail giant, he said, we have no uh, expansion plans to go international, including the outer lying states of Alaska and Hawaii. And here's the thing, you can become very successful, focusing in one place. In fact, I think a lot of people don't do that enough. And I started to realize, like, if I just dominated these areas, my exit strategy was that when Victoria's Secret does come, because I knew they would, they'll just buy me.
Are you?
And
Yeah.
that would be my exit plan.
Uh,
So I had a very clear strategy, and that's when I decided to leave my job and start it. And I bootstrapped it. I borrowed, equity from my house and started the first store that then turned in quickly into 7 stores.
wow.
Um,
All on
and
Oahu?
all on Oahu at first. And then I was planning on moving into Alaska, and I was doing all the due diligence to do the other things. And I was not just like, I was just using the same model that I use to bring complex technology and products to market in corporate. I was using the same model. It was just in a different industry. And an
And
industry,
what were you selling? Were you selling your own brand? Or are you buying other
both,
brands? Both.
both,
Okay.
both. And it was perfect too, because at the same time, Oprah Winfrey, she still had her daytime TV show. She discovered this new brand called Spanx by Sarah Blakely. I was the first to carry it in the state of Hawaii. And, when you're the first, you're going to do well if it's something people need. And because I had this mix of both business acumen and brand building, that's why I was able to grow it so quickly. But the timing of this was 2006 to 2007. So
Mm.
I have a very unlikely go to market, first time out entrepreneurial success story because I was leaning on my gifts, talents, and skills, which I still have. That's kind of why people, hire my company, is because that's what we're really good at. But what I didn't have was a great financial
Mm,
Structure, I didn't have friends who were great at financial projection.
mm,
I didn't have a great operations team to think through like all the inventory considerations. So, and when you are doing and having a small business, and then you choose a business that has high overhead, high risk during 2007 to
mm,
2008,
mm,
you can already know what happened there because most
mm,
people remember what happened in 2008. So I was in the two most risky industries, which was real estate and retail.
mm,
And, in 2008, the government didn't bail out small business, it bailed out Wall Street.
mm.
And so Main Street did not get bailed out at all. And as a result of that, I had built something that did $12 million in 2 years and then abruptly and literally felt like overnight was
Oh,
gone.
brutal.
It was brutal. And Victoria's Secret survived because they got bailed out.
Mm,
And it taught me a huge lesson back to like not just what do you do and why do you do it, but like who is with you on the journey? Who do you need for that next level of what you want? And up until that point, I didn't truly understand. I didn't even get it. Look, I got passed up for a promotion in corporate. I lost my business after crushing it, right? And when I looked at the pattern, I was like, it was because I didn't make friends with people that I didn't have relationships with. And that was the missing piece for me. And so after that, when I decided to go back to like deciding who am I going to be now, right? In 2008, after a very long period of, frankly, like depression and lost my confidence. And I was like, what the heck am I going to do with my life? I ruined everything. I thought I was so successful and now I'm not. Um, I realized that the best thing I could do is become a consultant because when I was in corporate, we always paid consultants better, listened to them more, and so I became a B2B service provider. That's really
mm.
what happened, and I've been that basically since then. And so, that's really like that's the short, long story to my career up until this point.
And in the book, which I misstated it earlier, is Unicorn Team is the name of the book. Um, Obviously informed from these previous experiences. So talk a little bit about what inspired you to write this book, and you've got some great stories in there and case studies as well.
Yeah, I mean, here's the book. If any of you can see us, like this is the book. And when I was wanting to bring this new idea to market, this book, the publishers really wanted a book on messaging from me because they were like, you're a brand strategist, you're really good at helping people reimagine and then remessage who they become. And I said, yeah, but before I do that book, I need to do this other book first.
Mm,
And they were like, yeah, but we don't need an operations book. I said, this is not an operations book. This is a book of who you need to become in order for your ideas to actually take flight in a way that you really dreamed of. And how bigger companies, including companies like Apple or Starbucks, all of those companies started out with one or two people who decided their idea was worth pursuing. They started it in a garage, on a kitchen, in a kitchen, in a diner where they scratched their ideas on a napkin. And what really was important is that those people became people that other people wanted to be a part of the idea. And so whenever a new client even works with us, the first question I have before we get into the messaging, which they think they're hiring me for, is tell me about who's on your team. And they're like, oh, no, 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 I don't need any help with team. I mean, I do, but it's not really what I'm here for. This is not what I need from you. And I said, here's the thing. You want to have this new rebrand, or you want to remessage, or you want to put this new idea out there, and you want people to adopt it. But what I need to know first is who's on the team now, and can those people bring you there? And also, who else are you working with? What kind of consultants are you working with? Uh, all of that. Because when I know who you're working with, I know now maybe there's a gap, and there usually is.
mhm,
I know who may not be right for the team going into the next season, and that doesn't necessarily even mean firing people. It might, but it's maybe that they're just not in the right position for where the company is going. And in the book, I address that around like, um, even if you're a solopreneur, like if you're like, you're one person and you've got maybe a couple contractors that work for you, same rules apply. Like you might not have the right contractors now to bring you to the next level. Do you need to reevaluate who's on your team? This is not about W-2s, full-time employees. It's about who do you need for the next season to get your ideas to the world? That's what this is. And when I know that, now I can actually then shape it with the right message and the right packaging and all the things. And that'll be my book number 2 that'll come out probably next year. But
Unicorn
that's
messaging.
yeah.
Yeah.
So this book was first because I felt like I was sick of talking about it.
Mm,
I was sick of actually explaining to people how it really works, how the sausage is really made,
mm,
and how, especially we live in a world now where people will say, well, the world's different. This strategy is not any different. You know, this is AI agnostic, this is technology agnostic, this is platform agnostic. This is pure strategy. This is actually like what it takes, and then you can decide the platforms and the technologies that you want to like help, lift off your ideas. But
yeah. I want
yeah.
to hear about some of the stories in there, starting with Kendra Scott. You write
Yeah.
her. She's actually at the beginning of the book. It's funny because I tell her story frequently. My
Yeah.
intersection with her, which is tangential. I've never met her personally, but I'm very active in Entrepreneurs Organization, and they have a program called the Entrepreneurial Masters Program. It's kind of like an executive MBA, which is done at MIT every year. And when I went and did it the first year, Vern Harnish, the founder EO, told this story about this woman named Kendra who was in the very program in the very same classroom as we were sitting in right there. And he told this story about how during the break, and this was like maybe 15 years ago or something, she came up to him in tears saying, I don't feel like I belong here. These people are more successful than me. I'm struggling. And he had to talk her into staying, which is
Hmm.
amazing because now, as you said, multi-billion-dollar company. She's been a guest shark on Shark Tank. So inspirational, but it reminds
Hmm.
us, how many of us go through these types of experiences.
Hmm.
But talk a little bit about like the unicorn team that she built to go from, designing jewelry on her own in her own house, starting the business with $500 to a multi-billion-dollar company.
Well, in chapter 13 of my book, I unveil the whole story and I actually show how Kendra Scott and I had very parallel paths between 2006 and 2008. While I was building this quote unquote underwear empire, um, and she was really a designer, as you said. Like I had this business background, right? She was a truly like an artist and a designer. But she had a vision. She had a big vision, and her vision was to get her jewelry, which she had this really cool, innovative thing that now a lot of people have basically copied, but she was one of the first, called the color bar, where she felt like your jewelry could go farther because you could like mix and match different like gemstones. So she had this very innovative, like flexible jewelry thing that was new. And so she felt like if I had a color bar in every major city, women could gather together and enjoy like the artistry and be their own jewelry designer. And so she tried it on her own in Austin, Texas, where she's headquartered, and she did pretty good. She did pretty good. She was really good at rallying people and people loved her designs. But she knew that in order to get through the recession, which was she had started Kendra Scott Jewelry during the recession, that number one, she was an EO probably like part of that time. And secondly, she asked herself, if I wanted to like expand and I don't have the money to expand, right? Who would I need to help me do that? So instead of asking how or what, she asked who. And she realized that, and she didn't have relationships. She didn't have like deep pocket relationships. She didn't have friends in the industry. So she said, if I were like another brand that I admire, who would it be? And it was Starbucks. She's like, how did Starbucks become like so um, mainstream accessible, right? From their little start in Seattle, Washington. And so she dug under it, just like I told you how I dug under the Les Wexner SEC filings to do my thing. Uh, she researched who was the great strategizer and mobilizer who expanded Starbucks's footprint, not just domestically, but globally. And it was this guy named Lon Weingart. Lon Weingart was Starbucks's great architect of expansion under Howard Schultz. And so in an act of bravery, she was scared. She talks about this in many interviews. Um, she reached out to Lon
Hmm.
and she said, I really love what you do. And by this time, Lon is a billionaire himself because he had early shares in the Starbucks expansion. He's literally a billionaire and he's not even the CEO. And that's what I also tell people. Like sometimes you got to bet on the right idea too, because
Hmm.
sometimes the best ideas aren't yours. They're like, whose idea can we all take flight with? So that's what happened. And he said no. And he said no like 3 or 4 times. He just kept telling her no. And if, of course, a kind professional way, but he's like, why should I take this on? I'm chilling, right? I'm doing great without doing more. And she just kept being persistent. And she said, look, I will do anything to get you in as a partner. I will stop taking a salary to show you how committed I am. I will work harder than anybody you have ever seen. And finally, after her just keep coming back, and she said the whole time she was scared, she was devastated every time he said no. She just kept believing in her vision, and she enrolled him in her vision.
Hmm. Hmm.
And as a result of that partnership, he's the one who brought the right venture investors to the party to expand the Kendra Scott brand. And as a result of that, she achieved her first $1 billion valuation the same year that Lon agreed to partner. And the rest is history.
Hmm.
And that all happened around 2008, 2009. And I tell people, and again, in the book, I really like map out and show and unpack how it all worked. But that's what my book is about. It's about like not just who are the unicorns you need, but are you a unicorn? Because people will rally behind the unicorn. If you separate yourself from the team, and that's the big problem with a lot of books today for any leadership, whether it's entrepreneurship, corporate. This book works across the pond, as you can tell, because I've been in both places and I've used the framework inside of it for everything I do. Um, and it's how I create really massive success for people and for myself because I use it because I've observed what works and what doesn't work. So that's what happened with Kendra Scott. And I think she can teach us a lot about sticking to your vision, but then also realizing that sometimes you need to be brave. In fact, a lot
Yeah.
of times you need to be brave.
And surround yourself with a team of people that buy into that vision. So
Correct.
that's so cool. I love that you chose to write this book first, and and that it totally makes sense that the messaging book, would not have a place if you hadn't written the book about the team because it requires the team to execute it. I'm curious, are there particular, like, as you look at like any company that has maybe they're rebranding or taking an idea to market, do you have like a vision of like the types of roles that the team needs to have?
Mhm.
Or is it hard, too broad to say something like that?
Well, no, actually, in the book, the framework is based on like the 3 tracks. So it's navigate, motivate, communicate. So navigate is about the idea and making sure that the idea is a winner. Okay, so that's the first part. The second part is the motivate track, which is about the people, to your question. And the first question is not how you motivate others, it's what is self-motivating to the unicorns that you're trying to enroll? Because getting a new idea to market requires a lot of energy. And there are a lot of books out there too that I feel like really focus on time management, which definitely is important. But the truth is that time is less important than your energy. And because you can create all kinds of space and time, but inside, if you have space and capacity and you don't have the energy to then lift off the idea, then it's all, who cares, right? Like it doesn't even matter. So what that part of the book explores is there are 9 types of leadership energies, and they're based on the concepts of visionizer, strategizer, and mobilizer. So I am a strategizing visionizer, so an SV. So I am high on strategy and secondarily on vision. Mobilization is not my strong suit. So um, in the book, I teach you how to think about yourself and what motivates you to push through hard things, like Kendra Scott did 5 times, getting rejected by Lon Weingart. That requires an energy that of winning, right? And so my that part, there's 9. So it's VV, VS, VM, SS, SV, SM, and then MM, SV. I mean, sorry, MM, MV, and MS. So the 9 different types. And once you understand your specific energy type or what self motivates you, then, and I tell people like everybody, of course, I'm being biased here, but if everybody used this particular assessment, and I have a full assessment in the book, and it's not a quiz, it's not clickbait, it's actually based on how people really like behave when they're faced with hard things. Um, Everyone should have their team members take it and share across the board what motivates them to finish things even when things are hard.
Mhm.
Now, this does not exempt you from hiring even contractors who are skilled in the thing that you need them to be in. So they need to be skilled first, and they also need to be a complementary energy type for your energy type. So to answer your question, unless I know your energy type, I can't tell you like what's the best thing, but I can tell you once you take the assessment, I can say,
Mhm.
oh, knowing that you're this energy type, you might want to look out for these types when you're hiring.
Mhm.
Because for me, I'm an SV and I do extremely well with SMs. Like
Mhm.
strategizing mobilizers are like my huckleberries. Like they are like every time someone has tested that, in general, there's a synchronicity that happens. Um, and SMs in general too are kind of your best COO types. They're really good at like making sure things get done, but strategically. And I do well when people have strategic minds, but they're doers. And so, but some people who are maybe more creative, they don't care much about S. And so they will like be looking for other Vs. And so again, it's really dependent on who you are. And in the book, I tell you, like, if you're this type, you're gonna probably work well with this other type in general.
And where can people go to check out that assessment?
They can only get it in the book, and so they can buy the book on Amazon. So you can go to unicornteambook.com. And right there's a link. You go get it, and then we give you the assessment. And the only way to get the assessment is to currently buy the book, which is great because at some point we will charge for the assessment, $200 or more. But right now, it's all about the book. So
Awesome. Cool. Jen, this has been great. We're about out of time, but I want to wrap up with my gratitude question. So I'm a big fan
yeah,
of gratitude, expressing gratitude to those who've helped you, especially in your journey. So I'd love to hear if there are any particular, peers, contemporaries, mentors that have helped you in your journey.
yeah. Early in my career, when I was 23, I had a boss. She was the general manager of one of the biggest advertising agencies in the world, right? Her name's Maria. And I remember at age 23, I asked her in my performance review, um, if I want to be you 10 years from now, because she was 33 and I thought she had it all. I was like, oh my gosh, like she's the head of one of the biggest advertising agencies. She looked young and vibrant. She was super smart. Every day her husband would walk down the street from like he had an office down in San Francisco and he would come by and bring her lunch. And she had 2 little babies too. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, that's exactly who I want to be in 10 years. And so I asked her, um, what do I have to do to have your life in 10 years? And she said, gosh, that's a really great question. Most people, young people don't ask that. And by the way, I think this is a really important question for any young person today. People that you admire, ask them that, you know, what do I have to do to have what you have? And what she told me was work on all the projects that no one wants because you will become the ultimate problem solver and be always valuable.
Hmm.
And so to this day, 25 years later, I still take that advice and it's still made, frankly, me not just a lot of impact and income, but it helps me with that mindset, take on the best clients that I can do to have fun seeing how I can be helping them to bring their ideas to life because those are very tender yet exciting times. And that early advice really has served me. So thank you, Maria. And she now is retired, but I think she's on a lot of boards of nonprofits now, and she's still in the Bay Area. So thank you, Maria.
Very cool. Jen, thank you so much. So unicornteambook.com is the website. Anywhere else you want to point people to go check out and learn more about you?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. I love to hang out there. I have a YouTube channel where I share a lot of different concepts and break down some of the ideas in all of my frameworks and thought models. And then on Instagram, I like to have conversations. So if you want to DM me there, I'm always over there too.
Awesome. Jen, thanks so much.
Thank you, John.
Thanks for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.